My name is Paige Palmer, and I'm 31 years old. On a Tuesday this past October, my mother walked into the legal aid office where I work in Dayton, Ohio, gave the receptionist her name, and looked straight through the woman standing behind the counter with an armful of case files, her own daughter. In her tote bag, I already knew, was a gray grid-ruled notebook. When I was 12, my parents decided the basics of my life were extras. When I was 14, they stopped paying for my food, my clothes, and my school supplies, and I worked 3 jobs just to eat and stay in school. At 15, they taped an envelope to my bedroom door and ordered me to pay them rent or move out. 16 years later, my mom had come back with a bill for all of it. What she slid across the table that Friday afternoon was bolder than anything she ever taped to my door. And what I slid back across that table is the reason my brother no longer speaks to me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally say the things their families spent decades not saying. If stories about standing your ground without raising your voice are your kind of stories, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Now, back to that Tuesday. The front desk called my extension a little after 2. "There's a Mrs. Palmer here," says she's family. I looked through the glass at the waiting room. 58 years old, cardigan ironed, purse squared on her knees like it had an appointment of its own. My mother sat in the same row of chairs where my clients sit, the evicted, the overdrawn, the quietly desperate. And she sat there like the chair should thank her. I hadn't heard her voice in almost 3 years, and that had been a wrong number hello. I did not go out. I sent a message down instead. Friday, 4 o'clock, conference room B. She could make an appointment like everyone else. Then I sat at my desk and looked at this calendar taped to my monitor. 21 days until closing on my first house. 9 years of saving, $38,000, a little brick ranch on Cornell Drive with a crabapple tree. 1 signature away. Whatever my mother wanted, history said it would come with a number attached. I had 7 days to decide what I owed the woman who once charged me for being her child. To decide honestly, I had to go back to a kitchen on Delmar Avenue in the fall of the year I turned 12. In 2007, my dad, Rick Palmer, lost his machinist job when the plant on Route 4 shut its doors, and he took warehouse work at half the pride. My mom, Donna, ran billing at a medical office and ran our house the same way. We were not poor. I want that on the record, because everything that came later gets excused by people who assume we were. The cable package got upgraded that year. Dad's truck payment never missed a month. There was a roast most Sundays. But that October, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and a new vocabulary word. Extras. "You're 12 now," she said. "Extras are on you." Extras, it turned out, meant shampoo, notebook paper, the headband I needed for volleyball, school pictures. Anything that touched only my life was reclassified, overnight, like a line item moved to a different column. I babysat for the Hendersons 2 doors down, $4 an hour, and that became my economy. My brother Dean was 16 then, and when I complained to him, he shrugged and said she'd started charging him for his own cleats that year too, so at least it was policy and not punishment. Somehow, that made it worse. Policy meant it was permanent. Policy meant somebody had written it down. At the end of that first month, my mother handed me a torn strip of paper by the stove, and it took me a second to understand what I was holding. September, $11.50. My first invoice, at 12 years old, itemized in my mother's perfect upright handwriting. She watched me read it, and she looked pleased, the way teachers look when a slow student finally catches on. The notebook lived on the kitchen counter between the toaster and the phone charger. Gray cover, grid-ruled pages, corners gone soft. My mother wrote in it the way other mothers wrote in baby books. Date, item, amount, initials. Her columns never wavered. I used to watch her total a page with a pencil and feel the same cold you feel watching someone sharpen a knife they claim is for the kitchen. Once, that winter, she caught me looking and misread my face for admiration. "My mother taught me this," she said, tapping the cover. "I paid her room and board at 16, $80 a month, 1984. Every month. On the 1st. She said it the way other people say they put themselves through college. And it made me. Nobody handed me a thing. And look at me. I never fell. Grandma Ruth died when I was 7, so I couldn't ask her side of it. All I remembered of her was a smell of cigarettes and a porch in Xenia, and the way my mother stood straighter around her than around anyone alive. But here is the detail that stayed with me, the one I chewed on at night. The first few pages of my mother's notebook weren't graph paper like the rest. They were older, yellowed, a different weight, glued in like transplants, and the handwriting on them, what little I glimpsed before she closed the cover, was not my mother's. Slanted. Harder. Someone else had started that book before her. It would be 3 more years before I found out whose hand it was, and by then, the notebook had a page with my whole childhood on it. 7th grade, the year I was 13, my class took a trip to the Science Museum in Columbus, $28, lunch included. I asked at dinner, and my mother didn't even look up. That's an extra. So I sold candy bars out of my backpack for 3 weeks, 50 cents profit each, and I made the bus with $1 in change to spare, and I told everyone my parents were big believers in earning things. I was already learning the second job, the one nobody pays you for, making it look chosen. That was also the year my sneakers gave out. The left sole peeled loose at the toe and flapped when I walked, so I glued it. And when the glue quit, I glued it again. And in the gym that spring, it slapped the floorboards on every layup, loud as a screen door. Mr. Kowalski, the PE teacher, looked at that shoe for a long second, and I laughed first. Which is a skill you develop. One night my dad watched me doctor the sole at the kitchen table with a tube of rubber cement. He opened his mouth. He got as far as "Paigey, maybe we..." And then my mother came in from the garage, and he studied his coffee like there was a message in it. I want to be fair to the girl I was. She wasn't stupid. She could see other kids' parents just buying things, gym shoes and museum tickets. No ledger, no invoice. She simply concluded the difference was a rule of her particular house. The way some houses take their shoes off at the door, you don't report a rule, you learn it. 14 was the year the arithmetic changed, and it changed on my birthday, over a boxed cake. March of 2009. My 14th birthday landed on a Tuesday, and we had cake from a box with store-brand frosting, which I only mention because I later saw the cake in the notebook. $9, itemized. When the plates were cleared, my mother folded her hands, and I knew the posture. It was her billing office voice, the one for people whose insurance had lapsed. "You're 14 now," she said. "Old enough for a work permit. So here's how it'll be. Food, clothes, school things. Your responsibility. All of it. We're done." I looked at my dad. My dad looked at the tablecloth. Dean was 18 by then, 2 months from moving out. And he gave me a shrug that was almost kind. "She did it to me at 16, he said. "You'll live." Nobody at that table seemed to notice they'd just moved the age 2 years. My mother stood, opened the pantry, and showed me what she'd done that afternoon. Masking tape labels on the shelves, Rick and Donna on the top 2, Dean on the 3rd, half empty already. And on the bottom shelf, bare except for its label, Paige. My shelf. My empty, waiting shelf. "Nothing in this house is free," my mother said, and she said it gently, like a blessing, like she was handing me the family's one heirloom. Before bed, she placed a single box of spaghetti on my shelf with a sticky note in her upright hand. "Starter loan, $4.80, interest-free. This once." I stood in the pantry doorway a long time that night, 14 years old as of that morning, doing a kind of math no kid should be fluent in. The spaghetti lasted 4 days. The note, I still have. Ohio lets a 14-year-old work, but it writes the rules tight, and I learned them the way other kids learned song lyrics. Work permit through the school office, physician's sign-off, parent signature. My mother signed with a flourish, delighted the state agreed I was employable. During the school year, no more than 3 hours on a school day, 18 hours a week, nothing past 7 at night. So I built my life inside those fences. Saturday mornings I worked Marge Whitfield's produce stand at the Wayne Avenue Market, $7.30 an hour, stacking sweet corn and making change from a cigar box. Weeknights I babysat, the Hendersons and the Currys, which the hour rules didn't much touch. Summers I stood the window of the Frosty Pine ice cream stand until my wrist ached from digging rock-hard butter pecan. Do the math with me, because I did it nightly. $36.50 from Saturdays, 20 or 25 from sitting. Call it 60 in a good week. Less in the school year. Out of that came lunches, deodorant, jeans from Village Thrift, pens in September, a calculator for algebra. Peanut butter came in the big tub. Bananas came in whatever weight was on markdown. Marge, who was nearly 60 then and had a stare that could unhusk corn on its own, paid me in cash and then loaded my bike basket with what she called seconds, bruised tomatoes that weren't bruised. Day-old bread from her neighbor's root, never a day old. I priced it all silently against my own shelf at home and said thank you and pedaled off. Toward the end of August, she watched me eat my lunch, folded bread from a bag and asked, not unkindly, "Your folks know you eat lunch out of a bread bag?" I said something about loving sandwiches and hated how smooth it came out. People ask later, kindly, why I didn't just sign up for free lunch. I did try. 9th grade, first a week, I took the form off the cafeteria bulletin board myself, walked it home, and put it in front of my parents. Here's what nobody tells you about that form. It runs on household income. The parents' income. My parents both worked. On paper, the Palmers of Delmar Avenue were fine, comfortable even, and my mother filled in every box with her exact honest numbers because she was never once dishonest with a form in her life. The denial came back in 2 weeks. We simply made too much money for me to eat. I remember standing at the mailbox understanding something enormous and having no word for it. The programs are built for houses with no money in them. They have no box for a house where the money just doesn't reach the child. So I adapted, which is the polite word for it. I ate lunch every other day and told a rotation of stories on the off days. Big breakfast, dentist later, track diet. I did homework in the public library on Wilmington Pike until close, because the library was warm, free, and asked no questions. 3 qualities I have valued in buildings and people ever since. I kept my grades up because grades were the one account where I was rich, and when I dropped 6 pounds by October, it was Mr. Kowalski, of all people, the sneaker watcher, who had moved up to the high school with our class, and who stopped me by the gym door and asked flat out if there was food at my house. I looked him in the eye, 14 years old, and said, "Tons, I'm on a training diet," and he believed me. That fast, that easy. Walking away, I understood I had gotten frighteningly good at lying, and that the lying was the only thing standing guard over the family that wasn't feeding me. Here is what a year of that does to a 14-year-old's brain, because I want you to understand the wound before I show you the scar. I stopped believing anyone would catch me, and I turned that into a religion. Pay first. Owe no one. Every seat in the world has a meter running, so feed the meter before anybody can ask. Marge tried to send me home with a loaf of bread once, free, just kindness, and I heard my own voice say, "I'll work it off a Saturday." She looked at me for a long moment over her glasses. She let me, but she wrote nothing down, and I remember being confused by that. Genuinely confused. A girl so fluent in ledgers she couldn't read a gift. My mother tended the fear that kept the whole machine quiet. She never said don't tell. She said it sideways, over dishes, casual as weather. You know what happens to kids who cry to teachers, foster care, group homes, strangers deciding your bedtime. And believe me, foster care doesn't have a shelf with your name on it either. I was 14 and careful. I checked what she said against nothing, because there was nothing to check it against. She was the only expert on the world I had. If you've ever kept a family's secret to protect the very people it was hurting, you already know why I stayed quiet, and you know the exact weight of that backpack. If you're still with me, do me one favor. Tap subscribe because you've met the girl now, and the stranger who finally noticed her is only a few minutes away. The winter of 9th grade came first, and it came for my coat. The winter I turned 15 came in hard off the flats, and my coat was 2 years and 4 inches too small. I wore it anyway through Thanksgiving, wrists out in the wind like a scarecrow, then gave in and hunted village thrift until I found a gray wool coat, $9, missing its belt but heavy as a hug. My mother drove me there, waited in the car with the engine running, and I was almost touched. That Sunday I passed through the kitchen and the notebook was open to my page, ink still fresh. Gas to village thrift. $4. She had billed me for the ride to buy the coat I bought with my own money. I stood there in the coat and read the line twice, and something in me went very still and very clear, the way pond water clears when you finally stop stirring it. There was no bottom to this. Good behavior would not close the account. The account was not designed to close. That night I started a notebook of my own, a 50-cent memo pad from the drugstore, and I want to be exact about what I wrote in it, because it's the only thing I've ever kept locked. Not debts, not grievances, dates. I wrote March 14th, 2013 at the top of the first page, my 18th birthday. And under it I wrote the number of days left, and every night I subtracted one, the way sailors mark a hull. 1100 and some when I started. I thought 18 was the finish line. It didn't occur to me, at 15, that my mother might see the same date on her own calendar and see an invoice coming due. 10th grade started in the fall of 2010, and that was the year my mother stopped pretending I was a daughter at all. That October I fell asleep in third period geometry, chin on my compass, and it wasn't the first time. For 3 weeks I'd been running an off-the-books morning job, boxing pastries at a bakery on Smithville Road from 5:45 to 7, cash under the tray, and I quit it myself when I realized a labor complaint could cost me the legal work permit that everything else hung on. I ran my own compliance department at 15. But the damage was on my face, and geometry teachers file reports, which is how I met Mrs. Carol Alvarez, school counselor, Fairmont Ridge High, a calm woman of about 40 with a cardigan collection and a gaze that took no notes you could see. She asked how things were at home. Fine. She asked what I was saving all these famous work hours for. College, ma'am. She asked when I'd last had a full night's sleep, and I said something charming about teenagers, and she smiled and let a silence sit there like a chair pulled out for me. I did not sit in it. Understand? She suspected. The shoes, the weight, the schedule. A counselor sees the pattern. But a suspicion is not reasonable cause, not when the kid is polite, feeding herself, pulling A's, and looking you dead in the eye saying she just likes earning her own money. The honor roll was my best disguise. Neglect gets found in failing kids, mine hid in the top 10%. She let me go with a granola bar from her desk drawer, which I ate slowly in the stairwell so no one would see it mattered. Outside her door hung a poster, red letters, see something, say something. I remember almost laughing. The only person who had seen everything was me. My father found his own way to file a protest, and I need you to see it, because it's the most Rick Palmer thing that ever happened. A Tuesday in the middle of October, he was waiting outside the library when it closed, truck idling at the curb, and when I got in, he didn't drive. He looked out the windshield at the dark and worked his jaw. And then he pressed a folded 20 into my hand like contraband. Don't tell your mother. His hand was shaking just barely. A machinist's hand. A hand that could true apart to 1/1000th of an inch, shaking over a $20 bill in a library parking lot. I said thank you. He nodded at the windshield. And then he almost said the other thing. He got as far as, "Those shoes, back in," and stopped, the sentence unraveling, and put the truck in gear, and we rode home with the radio covering for both of us. I've had 16 years to think about that 20. Here is where I landed. My father was not cruel. My father was a tenant too. The longest-standing tenant my mother had, paid up monthly in silence and small permissions. $20 bought a week of lunches. It did not buy a signature on a free lunch form, a word at the dinner table, a hand on the notebook. I folded the bill into my sock drawer and loved him anyway, and I want to tell you that love like that is a species of hunger. It keeps you circling the porch light, sure that this time the door will open. It never opened. But 11 days later, something did get taped to a door, and it was mine. Friday night, late October of 2010, I came home from babysitting the Curry twins, and there it was on my bedroom door, a manila envelope fixed with 2 strips of packing tape. My name on it in the upright hand. Inside, 1 index card. Rent, $250, due the 1st, or make other arrangements. I stood in the hallway holding it and heard the TV downstairs. A game show, applause. At dinner the next night, my mother laid it out with the serenity of a woman reading a utility notice. I was 15. I used lights, water, heat. A room had a market value. Nothing in this house is free, Paige, she said, and this time the blessing had a due date. I asked the obvious question. I made myself ask it slowly. And if I can't? My mother set down her fork, walked to the hall closet and opened it. On the floor, unzipped, empty, sat a navy duffel bag. New. Tag still on. She had bought a bag for my leaving before she ever named the price of my staying. Other arrangements, she said, and sat back down and asked Dad how the roast was. Dad said the roast was good. I went up to my room and did the arithmetic I already knew by heart, but I did it anyway. On paper. Because paper doesn't panic. Legal maximum during the school year, 18 hours. Saturdays at the stand, babysitting, every allowable hour filled. Call it $240 a month, and every dollar of it already spoken for by lunches and soap and the bus. $250 in rent wasn't a hard number, it was an impossible one. Which, I would eventually understand, was the point of it. I want the record to show that I tried to pay it, because a 15-year-old's first instinct isn't justice, it's staying. Sunday night, I came downstairs with a proposal written out like a grown-up. $150 a month, plus all the laundry, all the dishes, mowing through fall, snow through March, renegotiate in June when ice cream season opened. My mother read it twice. For 1 second, I swear, something in her face was almost proud. Then she folded it in half. $250. Rent isn't a negotiation. That's the lesson. So I liquidated. I sold my bike to a sophomore for $45, the bike that got me to the market, and started walking the 2 miles to Marge's stand in the dark. Marge noticed the missing bike in about 4 seconds. I asked her for more hours instead of explaining, and she turned me down flat, and I'll never forget her reasons. State says 18 hours, kid. I'm not losing you to a labor inspector. The one adult paying me fairly was fenced in by the same laws that were supposed to be protecting me from the people who weren't. On November 1st, I put $250 in the manila envelope, the bike money, the sock drawer 20, and everything else I had, and taped it to the kitchen door, because if this was rent, she could collect it like a landlord. I ate spaghetti and margarine for 3 weeks. My mother logged the payment in the notebook. Received, November 1st, on time. And in late November, I sat in the library with my memo pad and looked at December's math, and there was no version of it that worked. There are 2 ways out of a math problem with no answer. You cheat, or you show somebody the problem. The first Sunday of December, my parents drove to Middletown for a funeral visitation, and Dean was long gone to his apartment in Huber Heights. And I did the thing I'd never once dared. I opened the gray notebook. My pages, plural, I had 6 of them, went back to 2007 in that faultless hand. School pictures, $12. Cough syrup, $6.50. Birthday cake, $14, $9. My own birthday cake. Further back, a Christmas doll from when I was 9, billed retroactively the year the policy started, like a tax law reaching into the past. Volleyball headband. Glue, and I knew which glue, the rubber cement for my sneaker sole. The running total at the bottom of the 6th page said $1,914. My childhood had a subtotal, but that isn't the part that changed me. Tucked between the early pages sat a loose leaf, yellowed, soft as cloth, and the writing on it was the slanted hand from the front of the book. Donna, room and board, $80. Ode to the letter R. Week by week through 1984. Every payment marked. 1 week circled hard in pencil with a single word. Late. My mother had kept her own mother's invoice for 26 years, carried it from house to house like a relic, and built her book around it. I sat at that counter and felt the strangest thing I'd felt all year, and it took me a minute to name it. The notebook was the most honest thing my mother had ever shown me. It said, "This has no end." It said, "This didn't start with you." Then gravel popped in the driveway, home early, and I closed the book and put it back, 1 finger width off its usual angle. For a week I waited for the sky to fall. It never did. She couldn't imagine anyone touching it. The second Saturday of December I got to the stand at 7, having walked the 2 miles on a bowl of rice, and around 10 the crates started swimming. I remember holding an apple and being unsure, truly unsure, whether I was standing up straight. And then Marge's hand had my elbow and my whole weight was leaning on a woman of 60. She didn't ask a single question. She flipped the tarp over the tables, hung the Back Monday sign, and marched me 2 blocks to her kitchen, where she fried eggs and potatoes and set the plate down and stood at the stove with her back to me, out of mercy, while I ate like something out of a ditch. Only when the plate was clean did she sit down across from me with her coffee. "Rent," she said. At 15? I hadn't told her. She'd assembled it herself, the bike, the bread bag, the hours question. The woman could count. "Say it out loud, girl, because it doesn't sound righter the quieter you keep it." So I said it out loud, and she was right. It sounded insane in open air, $250 a month, the duffel bag with the tags on, and I heard my own voice wobble on the word arrangements. Marge didn't hug me. Not her instrument. She refilled my milk like she was topping off a truck and said there were people whose entire job was math like mine. Said the counselor at my school wasn't there to decorate the office. Monday came, and I stood outside Mrs. Alvarez's door with my hand raised, twice, and walked away. Twice, because my mother's voice, group homes, strangers, no shelf anywhere, was still the loudest thing in my skull. The third time I never got to knock. The problem walked itself in. Tuesday before winter break, Mrs. Alvarez called me in about exam schedules, an ordinary thing, and while I dug for a pen, my backpack tipped and the January envelope slid out onto her carpet. Manila, packing tape still on the corners. Rent. $250 due the first in the upright hand, and under it, new that month, late fee, $25. Mrs. Alvarez picked it up to hand it back, and read it, because it was printed like a shipping label. Impossible not to read. Then she closed her door. She asked 3 questions, spaced out, quiet, in a voice you'd use around a bird you didn't want to startle. "Who writes these? How long has this been going on? What have you eaten today?" And almost 2 years of load-bearing silence came down at once. I told her all of it at speed. The shelf with my name, the denial letter, the duffel bag with the tags, terrified that if I stopped talking, I'd never start again. And then I grabbed her sleeve and begged her, actually begged, not to tell anyone, because of the group homes, because of the strangers. She put her hand over my hand and told me the truth instead of a comfort, and I have loved her for it ever since. She was what the law calls a mandatory reporter. Now that she knew she was required to call Children's Services, not choosing to, required to, her license and her conscience both on the line. And their first job, she said, was keeping kids safe in their own homes whenever that could be done. Nobody was pulling me out of school for having empty cupboards. The point was to fill them. Then she leaned in and said the sentence I have carried like the 20 in the sock drawer. "Look at me. You are not the one failing here. If you were ever that kid, the capable one, the fine one, the one nobody thought to ask, put I see her in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't, because what the county did next is the part nobody expects." She picked up the phone while I was still in the chair. "Montgomery County Children's Services intake, please. No more walking away." The county moved faster than my nightmares did. Intake took the report Tuesday. By Thursday afternoon, a caseworker named Tanya Keller had a home visit scheduled, and my mother had 48 hours' notice and a lifetime of practice looking correct. You have never seen a set dressed so fast. Thursday morning, she went to Kroger before work. I found out because the receipt went into the notebook that same night, and I want you to sit with that entry the way I had to. Groceries for inspection. $84. She billed me for the food she bought to prove she fed me. By 4 o'clock, the masking tape labels were off the pantry shelves, rolled into a ball in the trash like shed skin. The manila envelope was gone from my door, tape scars and all. There were oranges in a bowl on the counter. We had never once had oranges in a bowl. Miss Keller came at 4:30, mid-30s, unhurried, a canvas bag of forms, and my mother served coffee and the performance of her life. We believe in teaching responsibility. Kids dramatize. You know how girls are. She gave the woman a tour like a realtor. My father sat on the edge of the couch in his work shirt with his hands flat on his knees, a man being inspected, and said the words, "good" and "yes" in their assigned slots. Keller nodded at everything, complimented the kitchen, wrote very little. I stood by the stairs cataloging all the ways this was going wrong, doing my old job, the fine girl, the seen-nothing girl. At the door, bag on her shoulder, Keller turned around like she'd forgotten her keys. "One more thing, I'll want to see Paige at school this week. Alone, standard procedure." I watched my mother's smile hold its position one full second too long. They gave us the conference room by the attendance office, and Miss Keller asked her questions the way surveyors drive stakes. Small, unremarkable, load-bearing, and only later do you see the shape of the property. When did the food stop? Who signed the work permit? Because the school keeps those records, ours and employers on file. Could she see the denial letter from the lunch program? There'd be a copy in the system. What did I weigh in September? The nurse's office had that too. What time did the market open Saturdays? Mrs. Whitfield wouldn't mind a phone call, would she? And here is the thing I hadn't understood. The thing I'd been protecting the wrong way all along. She didn't need my mother's notebook, and she didn't need me to perform my hunger. My life was already a file. The permit, the paychecks, the denial letter, the scale, the counselor, the produce stand hours. The state had been taking quiet attendance the whole time, and all my lying had ever protected was the gap between the records. I answered everything. I even told her about the oranges, and she wrote that down slower than anything else. Near the end, she capped her pen and gave it to me straight, because she'd clocked me as a kid who trusted procedure over promises. Based on what she had, the finding would likely be substantiated. Neglect, the basic needs kind. What came next, if my parents cooperated, was a case plan in the home. Groceries, clothes, school costs, no rent, and the agency checking in. If they didn't cooperate, it went in front of a judge in juvenile court, and Ohio has a word for parents who can pay for a child and won't. That night, my mother didn't yell. She sat under the kitchen light, opened the notebook, and started a brand new page. I'd learned soon enough what it was for. The case plan meeting happened the second week of January in a beige room at the agency, and it remains the only time I've watched my mother sign anything as though the pen were being held to her back. The terms were almost embarrassingly small, which is its own indictment. Food in the house, appropriate to a growing teenager, clothing seasonally adequate, school expenses covered, no rent, no fees, no charges to the minor child. I remember the caseworker reading that line evenly, no italics, and the room getting very quiet anyway. Home visits, scheduled and not, until further notice. My mother signed each page in her perfect hand, my father signed underneath like an echo, and when it was my turn to sign the youth acknowledgement, I heard Mrs. Alvarez in my head, "You are not the one failing here," and my signature came out steadier than either of theirs. Afterward, in the hallway, Alvarez was waiting with one more door. There was a legal aid office downtown, the Miami Valley Justice Center, that ran a children's rights clinic on Thursdays, and she'd made me an appointment, and I went. And a young attorney with a coffee-stained tie spent 40 minutes explaining me to myself. What I walked out holding was a yellow folder. Inside, A plain English summary of an Ohio parent's duty of support to a minor: food, shelter, clothing, till 18. Not negotiable, not billable. The line that said a parent cannot charge an enforceable rent to their own minor child. The line that said locking out a minor is abandonment, a crime, with a phone number under it. Names of real people who answer. It took 9 more years for the girl holding that folder to become the woman who prints them, and I have never once opened a new box of yellow folders at work without thinking of it. Nobody before had ever put in writing that I had rights. I read it under the covers with a flashlight twice, like contraband. Meanwhile, downstairs, the notebook got its new page. And one afternoon I saw the heading, printed neat as a tombstone: State Interference, Costs. My mother had opened an account for the United States of America. What followed wasn't peace. It was compliance. Which is peace with the warmth boiled off. The shelves refilled and the labels never came back. But every grocery run was performed at me. Receipts smoothed flat on the counter like subpoenas. New jeans appeared on my bed in a Meyer bag with the receipt stapled to it, twice, in case I missed the sacrifice. My mother spoke to me in the third person for most of that winter. Tell your daughter dinner's at 6. And I ate the dinners, because winning that particular staring contest was a luxury item and I was on a budget. But I owe you the one night that complicates her, because it happened. And leaving it out would make this story easier and falser. February 2 in the morning, I came down for water and the kitchen light was on. My mother sat at the table in her robe with the yellowed page from the notebook in front of her. Grandma Ruth's page, the slanted hand, the circled late. She didn't startle. Maybe she wanted a witness. $80 a month, she said, to the page more than to me. 1984. The month I came up short, she changed the locks. I slept in the Buick a week. January. A beat. I kept a coat in the trunk after that. Always keep a coat in the trunk page. Then she almost smiled, and what she said next, she said with the pride of a war story, which is the part that still breaks me. It made me. Nobody owed me a thing, and I never fell. I stood there with my glass of water, 15, and saw what she could not see at 42 and cannot see today. A girl in a cold car in January, waiting for a porch light. She hadn't never fallen. She had simply never been caught, and she'd spent her whole life since insisting the ground was a teacher. In the morning she was granted again, and the receipts kept coming. But I made myself a promise at that table, watching her fold her mother's invoice back into the book like a pressed flower. It took me 16 more years to keep it. The next 2 years I'll give you the way the county files probably give them. Stable, monitored, unremarkable. All the drama moved underground. Miss Keller's visits went from monthly to quarterly. My mother performed adequacy on schedule and logged every cost of it in the gray notebook, a bill she fully intended to present at a window she believed would someday open. My father developed a genius for the small end run. The spring I was 16, a bike appeared in the garage. Not new, wrong color, right size. And when I asked, he said a guy at the warehouse owed him, and that was the whole conversation. I found the pawn shop tag melted half off the frame in July. He'd bought my bike back, or its cousin, and he needed it never to be discussed, and so we never discussed it, which was our love language, items and silence. Me, I ran my exit like a small business. The legal aid attorney had told me one more thing that stuck. Get a bank account solely in your name, which Ohio allows a minor to do, and I fed it every Saturday like a meter, watching the produce stand money and the Frosty Pine money stack into 3 figures, then 4. Grades stayed weaponized. I made state honor roll junior year, and my only real extravagance was the $12 I paid. My money, my line in my own memo book, for the transcript stamps on 6 scholarship applications. Marge wrote the recommendation letter for all 6, and she showed me the draft exactly once, and I had to go stack seed potatoes so she wouldn't see my face, because the first line was, I have watched this child feed herself for 4 years, and I would trust her with my farm, my till, and my name. Sunday afternoons she taught me to put up applesauce and apple butter, jars lined on her sill like amber lamps, and she'd hand me 2, always 2. For selling, And for eating. Learn the difference, kid. I was still learning it. Then March came, I turned 18. And in June, my mother finally gave me the graduation present she'd been writing since I was 12. Graduation was a Friday in June of 2013, and I walked the stage at the arena with a cord for honors and a plan instead of a party. Sinclair in the fall, paid by scholarship and by me. Marge sat 11 rows up and whistled through her fingers. My parents came too, dressed nice, and clapped, and I have a photograph from that afternoon in which we look exactly like a family. Dinner afterward was at home. Boxed cake, store-brand frosting, the same brand as my 14th, and I genuinely don't know to this day whether that was thrift or theater. When the plates were cleared, my mother went to the counter and came back with the gray notebook, and set it beside the cake plate, and turned it to face me, open to a page headed with my name and totaled in red. $9,340. Food since the case plan. Clothes since the case plan. Her gas, her hours, her state interference page, the $84 of inspection groceries, all of it rolled up with the subtotals of my whole childhood. "You're 18 now," she said, and her voice was almost warm, and that's what made it obscene. "The county's out of it. We'll take monthly payments. Nothing in this house is free, Paige." My father's chair creaked. He said her name once, Donna, and it came out with no engine behind it. I looked at the number for a while. I felt very calm, and I have since learned to distrust that calm in clients, because it is the sound of a decision already made. I went upstairs and packed the navy duffel bag, hers, the one from the hall closet, tags long gone, and I came down and set my house key on the open notebook, squarely on the red total, where a payment would go. Consider the account settled. I walked out the front door and 2 miles through a June evening to Marge's, who met me on the porch, looked at the bag, and said, "Room over the garage. Rent is. You water my tomatoes." My father watched me go from the window. He didn't call out. 3 weeks later, the first envelope arrived at Marge's, forwarded in the upright hand. A statement. Past due. "Here's 13 years, quick, because you've earned the present tense. Sinclair at night, office filing by day, an associate degree, then the paralegal certificate. Then, I still think somebody upstairs has a sense of humor, a posting at the Miami Valley Justice Center, the same office whose yellow folder I once read under a blanket. I've been there 6 years now. Housing cases, family cases. I am the person who prints the folders." The past due statements came twice a year at first, regular as equinoxes, then annually, then hardly. I never answered one. I also never threw one away, and if you want to know how healed I was, there it is. A shoebox on my closet shelf, 13 years of my mother's arithmetic kept. Some accounts you close. Some you just stop feeding and keep in a box, and I told myself the box was closure, and the box was not closure. The box was me, still holding the door for her version of things. Dean called every Christmas from Indianapolis, and we discussed weather systems with real commitment. He'd send photos of his kids in matching pajamas. He signed cards from all of us. Marge got older and let me winterize her porch. And I saved. 9 years, $38,000, no cosigner, because asking for help still felt like debt with the paint scraped off. You can leave the house and keep living by its rules, and nobody warns you about that. By this fall, I had a pre-approval letter, a little brick ranch on Cornell Drive under contract, and a closing date circled for early November. Then, on a Tuesday, 3 weeks out, my mother walked into my waiting room with the gray notebook in her tote bag. It took Dean's phone call, that same night, for me to learn why now. Dean called at 9, which alone told me it was serious, because Dean calls at Christmas. No weather this time. Dad had been in Miami Valley South twice since July. His heart, a stent in August, no work since, and the warehouse sick pay ran dry in September. Mom's billing job had gone to part-time 3 years ago. They were 3 months behind on the apartment on Ridgecrest, and the landlord had already served the 3-day notice. Then came the reason for the call. Served the way Dean serves everything, casserole on top, ultimatum underneath. He was stretched thin. The kids, the mortgage, Indianapolis prices. But I was doing well, right? Single, no kids. And hey, I literally worked at a legal aid place. You of all people should get it, he said. Family helps family page. The ask had 2 doors. Door 1, I co-sign their new lease. Door 2, they move in with me. I told him I'd call him back by the weekend. And then I sat in my kitchen and did what I do, which is math on paper, because paper doesn't panic. A new co-signed lease is contingent debt. Contingent debt 3 weeks before closing means underwriting reopens my file, and a reopened file, on a first-time buyer margin as thin as mine, is a coin flip I could lose. The house or the lease. It was never really both. And now the honest part. The part I'd tell no one at the office. Lying in bed that night, I caught myself building the payment plan anyway. If I skipped this, deferred that, maybe I could carry them and still. And I sat up and turned on the light, a little sick. 19 years out of that house and my hands still knew the work. Paying was the one language my mother ever taught me fluently, and some tired midnight part of me still wanted to speak it to her, just once, and be told I was good. That's the version of me who walked into conference room B on Friday. 4 o'clock. She brought the notebook. I brought a folder of my own. Thursday night, my kitchen table looked like a hearing docket. Left side, my closing packet, the pre-approval, the saving statement, 9 years of Saturdays in a font. Right side, my laptop, and a stack still warm from the office printer. Because here is what I had actually been doing all week, while the midnight version of me was drafting surrenders. Montgomery County's emergency rental assistance application, their names, their address, their landlord's information, filled into the signature line. The hospital's financial hardship program for cardiac patients, filled in, with the number for the billing advocate who owed me a favor circled twice. A senior services intake. Dad qualifies now, which is its own strange sentence, with an appointment already scheduled, Tuesday at 10 in the morning, a real caseworker with a real name. Utility assistance for the gap months. A plain English sheet on how a payment plan stops an eviction if the landlord takes the county money, which this landlord, I checked the docket, has taken before. It was the same play the county once ran for a 15-year-old on Delmar Avenue. Not a check, a scaffold. Process, with dignity, which is the only currency I've ever seen actually break the fall. Then I did one more thing, the only impulsive act of the week. I went to the closet, took down the shoebox of past due statements, and from underneath it slid the old yellow folder, soft at the corners now, and from the folder the first page, the one titled in plain type, Rights of the Minor Child. The page I read under a blanket at 15. I put it on top of the stack for Friday, and I couldn't fully have told you that night whether it was for them or for me. Then I called Marge, 76 now and still ruining tomato hornworms' whole careers. I didn't ask for advice, I asked for a dinner. Sunday, she said. Come hungry. Bring nothing. And I sat with my hand over my eyes for a minute after we hung up, because after all these years, bring nothing is still the sentence that gets me. They were early. Through the conference room glass I watched them settle, my mother in the ironed cardigan, spine like rebar, my father gray around the mouth in a way that made my chest hurt, folding himself carefully into the chair like a man carrying something breakable, which I suppose he was. Dean attended as a phone, face up on the table, speaker on. I brought 2 waters and my folder, and sat, and for a moment nobody spoke, and the photocopier droned through the wall like a tide. My mother went first, of course. She set the gray notebook on the table. I'd guessed tote bag, and there it was. Older, softer, the same, and she slid it across to me. Open, deliberate, the way you'd present a verdict. The new page was headed 18 years and it was beautiful, if you can stand back far enough. Room, board, doctor, school. Until the state interfered, a line she'd actually written and actually meant. The number at the bottom, boxed and double underlined, was $52,000. The $9,000 of my graduation dinner had been an invoice. This was a valuation. My whole childhood, appraised like an estate. "We're not unreasonable," my mother said. "We'll settle for the rent situation. What's owed can wait." And then she did the thing I hadn't planned for. She lowered her voice, and for the first time in my 31 years, my mother spoke to me like a supplicant instead of a creditor. "Pay it, and it's finished, Paige. All of it. Clean slate. You come to Thanksgiving. You're our daughter again." My father's hand crossed the table halfway, an old man's hand now, and stopped short of mine. "She means it, Paigey," he said. Nobody had called me that in 18 years except once in a parking lot with a folded 20. From the phone, Dean's voice, gentle, terrible. "This is fixable, Paige. Families fix things. And here is the truth, because you've come this far with me, and you get the truth." For about 4 seconds I wanted it so badly my teeth ached. Thanksgiving. A chair with my name on it instead of a shelf. The whole warm package, right there. Retail price $52,000 or one co-signature, financing available. I looked at the notebook instead. And the notebook, faithful as ever, told me the truth the offer left out. Everyone at that table was waiting. And for once in my life, I knew exactly what I could afford. I didn't push the notebook back. I picked up my own folder. Yellow, because we still buy yellow. Some traditions deserve to survive. And I set it down on top of the open ledger, covering the boxed number, and I kept my hand flat on it while I talked. Quietly, the way Keller once drove her survey stakes. "Here's what I can give you. The rental assistance application, complete to the signature line, with the case number for a landlord who has taken county funds before. The cardiac hardship program, complete, billing advocate's direct line. Senior services intake Tuesday at 10 in the morning, and the caseworker's actual name, because names matter when you're scared. Utility gap coverage. The eviction timeline in plain English, what stops it, and by which date. Signatures and one bus ride," I said. "It's real, it works, and it's what I have. Process, not ransom. It's what saved my life once. If you let it, it'll hold yours." My mother looked at the folder the way you'd look at a foreign banknote. "That's paperwork," she said. "We're your parents. You have savings," Dean said. And there it was. And it was almost a relief, the meter running under the offer of the meal. I took my hand off the folder and sat back. If I pay that page, there'll be a next page. There's always a next page. That's how the notebook works. It's how it worked when Grandma Ruth kept it. Her chin came up as if I'd slapped the table. "You taught me nothing in this house is free," I said. "I believed you, that's why I stopped living in your house. I'm not buying a seat at Thanksgiving, Mom. I'm closing the account." The room went very still, photocopier and all, it seemed. And my mother, my granite, upright, never once loud mother, lost her voice's footing for the first time in my memory. "After everything we—" The sentence stood there, unfinished, in front of all of us, because there was no honest way to finish it. And watching her hear that herself was the closest thing to an earthquake I ever expect to see in a conference room. She snatched the notebook back and swept the folder aside, and my father caught it, squared it, and drew it over to his side of the table with both hands. A whole marriage renegotiated in one gesture, and she watched it happen. From the phone, Dean, disgusted. "You're really doing this. You're heartless, you know that?" I reached over and tapped the speaker off. No slam, just a click. The quietest door I ever closed. Then I slid one last page out from under the folder's flap and laid it in front of my father. Old paper. Plain type. Rights of the minor child. Corners gone soft as flannel. "Keep that page." Somebody handed it to a 15-year-old once, a girl who thought she owed rent for being born. "It's the only thing in this folder that isn't a form." My mother stood, straightened her cardigan, and walked out of the room I work in. My father sat 1 second longer. Then he folded the yellow folder into his jacket, against his chest, the exact way a man hides a $20 bill. The invoice for that Friday arrived over the weekend, and I want you to see the price tag, because catharsis without a receipt is a fairy tale and you deserve better from me. Saturday morning, a voicemail from Dean. 90 seconds. Very calm, which is how Dean does fury. I had embarrassed him. I had abandoned 2 sick old people over childhood bookkeeping. Don't call when they're gone. His actual words? And he meant them. And as of this telling, that phone has stayed quiet through a Christmas. Sunday, a text from Aunt Charlene in Springboro, my mother's version already installed. Shameful, after everything they sacrificed. I read it once, standing at the counter. I did not compose the correcting essay. Version control of the Palmer family record was a job I resigned that Friday, and grief and freedom, it turns out, can fit in the same hour of a Sunday. Then I drove out to Marge's and ate pot roast and brought nothing, as instructed, and sat on my hands through the whole meal fighting the reflex to earn it, and Marge watched me do it with her corn unhusking stare and said, at last, "Look at that. Girl finally learned to eat a free meal. Only took 20 years. I laughed until my eyes needed the napkin. About 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday, my father called me for the first time in my adult life. His number, his voice, no intermediary. The rent application had gone through, most of it anyway. Landlord took the county money and a payment plan. The Tuesday caseworker was, quote, "Good people. She brings folders like you." Then a silence with weight to it, and my father cleared his throat and paid a debt of his own. 7th grade, the sneakers with the flapping sole. I saw it, Paigey. I bought a lottery ticket that Friday instead of shoes, because shoes would have started a fight. I've owed you that sentence a long time. He didn't ask for money, or absolution, or Thanksgiving. He just set the thing down after 18 years of carrying it. And a few days after that call, on a gray morning with the crabapple losing its leaves out front, I closed on my house. The first night in the house on Cornell Drive, I did exactly one piece of decorating. I loaded the pantry. Every shelf, corn and peaches and Marge's applesauce, the big tub of peanut butter I still buy because some habits are load-bearing, and I put labels on nothing. I stood in that doorway a long time. 12-year-old me looked at those shelves through my eyes, and I'm not going to perform for you what that felt like. Some rooms you just stand in. The housewarming was 6 people. Marge brought tomatoes and cased the place like a foreman, and a card came in the mail from Carol Alvarez, retired now down in Waynesville, because I'd written to her last spring, and counselors answer their mail. Inside, under the printed part, one line in her steady hand. You were never the one failing. I put it on the refrigerator, eye level, where a notebook used to live in another kitchen. My mother's version of that Friday is out there working the family circuit, and it's a good product. Ungrateful daughter, sick father, heartless girl with her savings account. Some cousins bought it. The force that built her never went out of business. I just closed my branch. She still has the gray notebook. I assume it's open on some counter right now with a page that has my name on it, accruing. That used to be the thing I couldn't stand, the account running with no one at the window. It doesn't run in my house. That's the whole revenge, if you insist on the word. Her interest compounds in a book nobody reads, and my pantry has no names in it. And at work, a Thursday last month, Intake sent me a 15-year-old girl, honor roll, 2 jobs, polite as a bank teller, fed herself since spring, parents doing just fine on paper. I know the disguise. I invented half of it. I slid the yellow folder across the table and watched her grip it, and I gave her the sentence the way it was given to me, word for word, like something handed down that isn't a debt. Look at me. You are not the one failing here. So here is where the ledger of my family stands, since I'm the one telling it. Dean, silence, his choice, and I've stopped billing him for it in my head. That's the part of the practice that took real work. Dad and I run a small, sturdy trade route. I mail a postcard on the 1st of every month, the crabapple in fall, the county fair, nothing that demands an answer. He texts back like a machinist. Got it. Tree looks good. Take care. Short and true, like parts machined to 1,000th. It's not a reunion. It's a route, and Roots can be trusted. My mother, I hear, tells people she has one son. There's a chair at my table anyway. Anyone will tell you I don't say this warmly, I say it the way I'd note a property line. The day Donna Palmer arrives at my door without that notebook, without the notebook in her bag or in her sentences, there is a chair, and pot roast, and no invoice waiting under the plate. I don't expect her. I don't wait by this door anymore either. The porch light's just on because it's my porch, and I pay the electric bill gladly. It's the only bill in this story I've ever been glad to pay. If somebody hands you a bill for loving you, hear me on this one thing. You are allowed to close the account. Because walking away from a debt you never owed is not abandoning your family. It is refusing to abandon yourself. And no ledger on this earth outweighs a pantry full of food with no names taped to the shelves. That's my story. A gray notebook, a yellow folder, a shelf with no names on it. If this reminded you of a kid who seems a little too self-sufficient, ask one more question. The capable ones are the best hiders. And if someone you love needs permission to close an account they never opened, share this with them today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Not ransom. It's what saved my life once. If you let it, it'll hold yours. My mother looked at the folder the way you'd look at a foreign banknote. That's paperwork, she said. We're your parents. You have savings, Dean said. And there it was. And it was almost a relief, the meter running under the offer of the meal. I took my hand off the folder and sat back. If I pay that page, there'll be a next page. There's always a next page. That's how the notebook works. It's how it worked when Grandma Ruth kept it. Her chin came up as if I'd slapped the table. You taught me nothing in this house is free, I said. I believed you, that's why I stopped living in your house. I'm not buying a seat at Thanksgiving, Mom. I'm closing the account. The room went very still, photocopier and all, it seemed. And my mother, my granite, upright, never once loud mother, lost her voice's footing for the first time in my memory. After everything The sentence stood there, unfinished, in front of all of us, because there was no honest way to finish it. And watching her hear that herself was the closest thing to an earthquake I ever expect to see in a conference room. She snatched the notebook back and swept the folder aside, and my father caught it, squared it, and drew it over to his side of the table with both hands. A whole marriage renegotiated in one gesture, and she watched it happen. From the phone, Dean, disgusted. You're really doing this. You're heartless, you know that? I reached over and tapped the speaker off. No slam, just a click. The quietest door I ever closed. Then I slid one last page out from under the folder's flap and laid it in front of my father. Old paper. Plain type. Rights of the minor child. Corners gone soft as flannel. Keep that page. Somebody handed it to a 15-year-old once, a girl who thought she owed rent for being born. It's the only thing in this folder that isn't a form. My mother stood, straightened her cardigan, and walked out of the room I work in. My father sat 1 second longer. Then he folded the yellow folder into his jacket, against his chest, the exact way a man hides a $20 bill. The invoice for that Friday arrived over the weekend, and I want you to see the price tag, because catharsis without a receipt is a fairy tale and you deserve better from me. Saturday morning, a voicemail from Dean, 90 seconds, very calm, which is how Dean does fury. I had embarrassed him. I had abandoned 2 sick old people over childhood bookkeeping. Don't call when they're gone. His actual words? And he meant them. And as of this telling, that phone has stayed quiet through a Christmas. Sunday, a text from Aunt Charlene in Springboro, my mother's version already installed. Shameful, after everything they sacrificed. I read it once, standing at the counter. I did not compose the correcting essay. Version control of the Palmer family record was a job I resigned that Friday, and grief and freedom, it turns out, can fit in the same hour of a Sunday. Then I drove out to Marge's and ate pot roast and brought nothing, as instructed, and sat on my hands through the whole meal fighting the reflex to earn it, and Marge watched me do it with her corn unhusking stare and said, at last, "Look at that. Girl finally learned to eat a free meal." Only took 20 years. I laughed until my eyes needed the napkin. About 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday, my father called me for the first time in my adult life. His number, his voice, no intermediary. The rent application had gone through, most of it anyway. Landlord took the county money and a payment plan. The Tuesday caseworker was, quote, "Good people. She brings folders like you." Then a silence with weight to it, and my father cleared his throat and paid a debt of his own. 7th grade, the sneakers with the flapping sole. I saw it, Paigey. I bought a lottery ticket that Friday instead of shoes, because shoes would have started a fight. I've owed you that sentence a long time. He didn't ask for money, or absolution, or Thanksgiving. He just set the thing down after 18 years of carrying it. And a few days after that call, on a gray morning with the crabapple losing its leaves out front, I closed on my house. The first night in the house on Cornell Drive, I did exactly one piece of decorating. I loaded the pantry. Every shelf, corn and peaches and Marge's applesauce, the big tub of peanut butter I still buy because some habits are load-bearing, and I put labels on nothing. I stood in that doorway a long time. 12-year-old me looked at those shelves through my eyes, and I'm not going to perform for you what that felt like. Some rooms you just stand in. The housewarming was 6 people. Marge brought tomatoes and cased the place like a foreman, and a card came in the mail from Carol Alvarez, retired now down in Waynesville, because I'd written to her last spring, and counselors answer their mail. Inside, under the printed part, one line in her steady hand: "You were never the one failing." I put it on the refrigerator, eye level, where a notebook used to live in another kitchen. My mother's version of that Friday is out there working the family circuit, and it's a good product. Ungrateful daughter, sick father, heartless girl with her savings account. Some cousins bought it. The force that built her never went out of business. I just closed my branch. She still has the gray notebook. I assume it's open on some counter right now with a page that has my name on it, accruing. That used to be the thing I couldn't stand, the account running with no one at the window. It doesn't run in my house. That's the whole revenge, if you insist on the word. Her interest compounds in a book nobody reads, and my pantry has no names in it. And at work, a Thursday last month, intake sent me a 15-year-old girl, honor roll, 2 jobs, polite as a bank teller, fed herself since spring, parents doing just fine on paper. I know the disguise. I invented half of it. I slid the yellow folder across the table and watched her grip it, and I gave her the sentence the way it was given to me, word for word, like something handed down that isn't a debt. Look at me. You are not the one failing here. So here is where the ledger of my family stands, since I'm the one telling it. Dean, silence, his choice, and I've stopped billing him for it in my head. That's the part of the practice that took real work. Dad and I run a small, sturdy trade route. I mail a postcard on the 1st of every month, the crabapple in fall, the county fair, nothing that demands an answer. He texts back like a machinist. Got it. Tree looks good. Take care. Short and true, like parts machined to 1,000th. It's not a reunion, it's a route, and roots can be trusted. My mother, I hear, tells people she has 1 son. There's a chair at my table anyway. Anyone will tell you I don't say this warmly, I say it the way I'd note a property line. The day Donna Palmer arrives at my door without that notebook, without the notebook in her bag or in her sentences, there is a chair, and pot roast, and no invoice waiting under the plate. I don't expect her. I don't wait by this door anymore either. The porch light's just on because it's my porch, and I pay the electric bill gladly. It's the only bill in this story I've ever been glad to pay. If somebody hands you a bill for loving you, hear me on this one thing. You are allowed to close the account. Because walking away from a debt you never owed is not abandoning your family. It is refusing to abandon yourself. And no ledger on this earth outweighs a pantry full of food with no names taped to the shelves. That's my story. A gray notebook, a yellow folder, a shelf with no names on it. If this reminded you of a kid who seems a little too self-sufficient, ask one more question. The capable ones are the best hiders. And if someone you love needs permission to close an account they never opened, share this with them today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.